So we're thrilled. Well, today is a special morning because we have an awesome couple here, and they are a family, but their kids are all grown, and you'll hear a little bit more about their family and their story. But Todd and Maureen Erickson, who are from Northern Virginia, and actually at one point led Young Life for Loudoun County, and at one point on staff at Destiny Church across the street, who we partner with for Move, reaching our middle and high school students, really good friends of ours over there. In fact, Todd and Maureen were over there last Sunday sharing with them. But they're here today, and again, we sent our team of students in partnership with Church of the Holy Spirit to Guatemala this summer, and it was amazing, and you guys have heard from the students, you guys have seen the video, but what I love about that is we were there to help strategically with what God has called the Ericksons and the church there and IDC missions and all that God is doing there. We got to just come and support that and give our energy and our time and our resources to just move that mission forward even more. And it was amazing. We're thrilled that we have this friendship now and this partnership. And thrilled that they got, they're only here for a month. And they decided and were willing and gave us one Sunday to be with us on October 1st. So we're just thrilled. So Todd and Maureen are going to, and you've got some coasters they're going to share, but let's welcome Todd and Maureen up here as they share with us this morning.
Hey, we are excited to be here, thrilled to be on your turf, considering that Headway was down on our turf just a few weeks ago, really. So here's the deal this morning. We want to share some of our story, but here's the reason. We want to share some of our story of how we got from here, because we moved from Leesburg, we moved from your house. We moved from Leesburg to Guatemala. We want to share a little bit of that story to the point where now I am serving as a pastor of a church in Antigua, Guatemala. Maureen's teaching English in the same town. And we want to talk a little bit about how we got from here to there. And we want to share, not because it's dramatic or not because we are overly spiritual people, but we want to share because God's taught us a lot in the process. And he is continuing to teach us. And so really what we want to do is share just a little bit of what we've learned as we've gone along. And so that's what we're here for this morning. So let's go back to the very beginning. We're going to go back to not Genesis 1, but rather 2009. Maureen and I have 3 kids. And at this point, we had a daughter at County, a son at Smarts Mill, and another daughter going to school where Maureen was a teacher at a Christian school in Ashburn. I was serving with Destiny Church, and life was pretty good, to be honest with you. We had a house that we enjoyed. We had friends. We had community. It felt good. But here's what happened. Things started shifting in the midst of that. So we weren't looking for this, but this rather found us. First thing that happened was our church decided to become more missions-focused. And so what happened was I was in a leadership meeting, and many of you have been in meetings like this where you go, hey, let's do this. Let's focus on being more missions-oriented or focus on whatever it happens to be. And then they look across the table at you and go, hey, Todd, why don't you do that? And so I kind of got volunteered for that. Wasn't against it, but just it wasn't necessarily my thing. It wasn't what I was thinking about. And then soon after that, Haiti had an incredibly bad earthquake. And we had some connections with people at Mission Aviation Fellowship. And there were 4 of us that were airlifted in to Haiti just days after the earthquake. And we were able to minister to and pray with people as they were suffering and dying, and they weren't even in the point of rebuilding, they were in the point of rescuing people. And I came back from that going, there's suffering in the world. Suffering that, as I lived in Loudoun County, I didn't see on a daily basis. It wasn't even a surprise to me, but it was just a realization for me to go, life's bigger. There's more out there than I realized. At the same time, Maureen was reading the book Crazy Love by Francis Chan, And she would, as what often happens in our family, she'll highlight, some parts of the book and then hand it to me. And so I get kind of the cliff notes, but I get the good stuff. And the Lord's moving in both of our hearts at this time. Another thing that happened, we celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. We went to Annapolis. We had a great dinner together. And as we sat at that dinner, we talked about the things that had gone great in the last 20 years, the things we wanted to work on. And one of the action points we had from that time together was we want to have each of our kids go on a mission trip while they're in high school, whether they're walking with Jesus or not. We want their world vision to be expanded. We want them to be able to see that there's more to the world than what they were living in Loudoun County. And you guys know what I'm talking about. So, remember, life was good. It was really good. We enjoyed it. But at the same time, as these things were happening, we wondered if there was more. To a certain extent, we were doing life and ministry sort of on autopilot. It wasn't because we were so talented. It just happened to work out that way, that we were doing it. And we desired greater dependence on God. And we said that out loud to one another. That's what we wanted, because in many ways, our life had become more about us than about Jesus. And even though we were both involved in ministry, it still was more about who we were than who Jesus was. Let me share with you a situation in the Gospel of John. In the beginning of the Gospel of John, John is in a very similar situation. His ministry was going great. Life was good for him. People saw his ministry, and they thought he was Elijah. They thought he was a prophet. Some thought that he might be the Messiah. And then Jesus shows up. And when Jesus shows up, John points to him and sends his disciples that way. That's in chapter 1. A couple chapters later, in chapter 3, here's what he says. He says, "He must become greater, and I must become less." He's realizing that ministry and what he was doing, although it was good, it wasn't about him. It was about Jesus and pointing people to Jesus. And that's what we wanted as well. That's what was our desire. We wanted more dependency and less self-sufficiency. So here's what happens next. A lot of discussion between our kids. I took a trip to a monastery in Berryville. When I lived here, if I needed to get time away, then I would sneak into this monastery. I'm not Catholic. I don't have a Catholic background. I wasn't wearing a robe. I just kind of made my way onto the property. They let me. But here is the funny thing. On this particular trip, I went because I wanted to hear from God. I wanted him to affirm to me that this is what he was calling us to. I didn't even get to the monastery. I just got past Round Hill and started climbing the mountain. And at that point, I just started bawling, knowing that God was calling me to something else, knowing that that desire that we had to live in greater dependence was from him and that he wanted us to do something about that. So we started having some conversations about where we would serve, how we would serve, a lot of prayer. We knew we were going to go to Guatemala. But this was a looming change that was a bit overwhelming for us because we were still living a normal life. And I remember one particular week, our life was busy. We were driving kids to sports. I mean, each of our kids played lacrosse. They were swimming. They were doing all sorts of different things. And so Maureen and I, like many of you, we would kind of pass like ships in the night and wouldn't always connect. But we knew what was going on in each other's hearts. And so one morning, and this isn't the best timing as a husband. If you're a husband, don't do this. But Maureen was getting ready to go to school. The kids were running around getting ready to go to school. And I caught her in the hallway. And I said, hey, today, because I had a meeting scheduled that day with the leadership team of the church. And I said, hey, today I'm going to tell Greg I'm going to quit. To which Maureen looked at me and said, oh, shoot. Except she didn't say shoot. But her response was, I mean, it wasn't a response. She wasn't cursing at God. But her response was not even a surprise of, wait a minute, we're going somewhere, but rather a realization that this is really going to happen, that this is going to be a big step for us, and we're going to move to Central America. So at this point, fast forward now to August 30th, 2010, our family gathers together 10 Foot Lockers, and we head to Dulles to get on a plane. And that's where you can pick up.
My family says that we moved to Guatemala because I didn't know any Spanish cuss words, and they thought that would be a good place for me to live. But I learned them. Anyway, we were really excited when we first went. And those of you that have been in Antigua, it's beautiful. Guatemala's beautiful, and plenty of people adjust very quickly. Plenty of people come down for a week and say, "Oh, I could live here." And every time I hear that, I think it's different when you don't have the return plane ticket, you know. But and plenty of people do it though and are fine. But I wasn't one of those people. So anyway, we moved there, but the newness quickly wore off. I'd been a teacher that was very well respected here. People requested to be in my class. I led Bible studies. We were in sports. We were, all our kids' friends hung out at our house. And all of a sudden, I go to a town where I can't even say Jesus loves you in the language, and I can't communicate. No one knows who I am. My humor doesn't translate. Nothing. I mean, I was just stripped of everything, more than I'd expected I was going to be stripped of. And the thing is that's what we wanted. That's what we wanted, was a greater dependence, until we got there. And then I went, oh, yeah. Once again, I was like, yeah, I'm in over my head. But one day I was walking, there's beautiful volcanoes, and they're active and they puff, and it's beautiful. It's not scary to me, at least. And I was walking down the street one day, though, and I'm looking at this volcano, and I just started crying, and I said, I can't believe all my friends get to live in Northern Virginia, and God makes me live here. And that's the way I felt, because I was just so overwhelmed. And, what was really interesting, though, was that we'd asked for that, is that we wanted to be in greater dependence, and he called us there, and we had no question about that. And so a verse that even now still I'm working on is Philippians 4:11. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever circumstance I am to be content. I'm not there. Please don't think that that I'm already there. But I learned a lot. Okay, so I'm not in Loudoun County. I'm in Guatemala, and I learned how to be content with what I had, and I'm still learning that. But it was such a good goal. But the thing that it makes me think of this morning is that some of you are not where you want to be. And some of you are where you want to be, and you're super excited that you're there. And some of you are thinking, am I ever going to get where I want to be? Some of you don't know where you want to be. And but I challenge you just to be content where you are. That doesn't mean God's not going to move you. That doesn't mean that situations won't change. But where he has you, he wants to use you. I promise you that. And so whether it's your perfect situation, it's not going to stay that way, or whether it's a terrible situation, it's probably not going to stay that way either. So just learn how to be content where you are, or work on that. I mean, not that it's not something that happens overnight. But anyway, going along, so we had 3 kids, and every weekend, Todd and the 3 kids would go out exploring, and they'd go, there were ruins, and there's just all sorts of stuff to see. And I was so flippin' overwhelmed with everything new that on the weekends, I would be like, I'm not going out of the house. I'm going to get a book. I'm going to lay in my bed. I'm going to read. I don't want to experience anything new. And so they would go out and do all this stuff, and I wouldn't, because I was like, I can't experience anything new. And then during the week, we'd go back to but anyway, so they were just like, this is great. Everything's, but everyone in the family adjusted a little faster than me. Katie, as we said, was a junior at Loudoun County. And so when she moved there, she is now married to a Guatemalan, and she lives 5 hours away from us in Coban. And she's an executive pastor at a church and works with children. She went to Wheaton College. Her husband is of Mayan descent. So Spanish is his second language, and they work with Korean Americans some of them are on their base. And so I told him if he learns Korean before he learns English that we're going to have words because I'm next. But he's in charge of all the construction and maintenance on the grounds. And so anyway, their life completely changed. That was not, when we went there, I had no idea that was what she would be doing with her life. Then there was Clay, like somebody had said, he played lacrosse, and he skateboarded. So when we left here, he took extra wheels for his skateboard because he didn't know if he could get wheels there, and he took some extra lacrosse balls, and he gets there and he finds out that we moved to a cobblestone town, and you don't skateboard at all, and nobody knows how to play lacrosse, and I really thought, oh no, what have we done, But really, with each one of my kids, I prayed specifically that God would give them the vision of why we moved there. So many families would move and not, and it was the parents' job, not the kids. And then they weren't happy, or they would leave early, or a lot of things happen, And I didn't even pray that they would go into full-time ministry. I just prayed that God would find some reason that they would feel that God called them to that place, not just us. So anyway, Clay ended up meeting a girl on a mission trip, and first of all, he taught himself guitar and video production and editing.
While I was supposed to be overseeing his homeschooling.
You can see, I was in education, and then there was anyway, but the reason he oversaw it was because Clay wouldn't still be living if I had overseen it. So we thought it was better that Todd do that. But anyway, very quickly, Clay ended up getting married, moved to Washington State. He is now he was a worship leader. He got hired as a worship leader at church, and then transitioned, and he is now the video director for a 7-campus church. And all self-taught during homeschool when he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. And all my kids are fluent in Spanish. He has 2 kids, and they live in a very tiny home, and they're building a home in Guatemala so that they could go back and forth. And to me, that just does my heart so well because it just, I just know that that's home to him, So anyway, they have a real heart for ministry. And then Emily, she moved when she was 10, and she learned way more about people's lives that were rough in the village, way more and way faster than I would have had her learn it if we had lived here. She heard stories and saw things that really were hard. And but because of that, God built a compassion in her, and she's also very good with kids, but built a compassion in her that was unlike many I've seen. And she's married also, and she married a Guatemalan young man, and he left his home at 10 because his dad kicked him out because he was trying to protect his mom from his dad, and never did go back home. And so she really has seen some of the harder, the other two too, but it impacted her. So anyway, she works full time now at a children's home, and it's called a children's home. It's half orphanage and half foster care because they don't really have foster care, so it does both. And I will say, and I don't know how we are in time, but okay, so Todd told me, don't go off track and tell stories, all right? But I got to tell you one story really quick. This just happened last week, so you'll really appreciate it. It's real quick. So their home is like three blocks from our house, the orphanage, because she lives near us, and it's on the corner. And Kelly and her family came down this summer, Logan, and they came this summer, so they've been there. And then about 3 or 4 houses over is a courthouse, and they process narco traffickers in that house. So apparently a week before we came, so a month ago, a judge told a narco trafficker that his fine was 5,000 quetzales and that he had to pay it to a nonprofit. Yeah, a nonprofit or a charity. I'm assuming someone in the courthouse told him about the children's home because this narco trafficker with his envelope of 5,000 quetzales cash walked down the street, came to their door, knocked, and said, "Hi, I'd like to donate this money to your..." And the lady said, "Okay, thanks." That was the psychologist. And she said, "We'll take it." And then he said, "But I need a receipt right now." And then he takes it and walks back to the judge and says, "I did what you told me." And I was like, what a great fundraising strategy. That is absolutely unbelievable. And the funny thing is that Emily's license had just expired and she's been driving the kids to school. And so she went to Valerie, who's the director, and she said, "Listen, my license is expired. I can drive them today, but I need to get it renewed. I shouldn't be driving an expired license." She goes, "Well, the Lord just provided 5,000 quetzales. Go ahead and take some money and go get your license renewed." So anyway, thank you to the narco trafficker that paid for that. So anyway, the thing is that God wanted us to be content, and we realized that the one thing that I had not prepared my kids for was a worldview that was bigger than Loudoun County. And I love Loudoun County, but I realized that we hadn't taken them anywhere, or they hadn't seen how the rest of the world lives, and so they thought that this was it. And so my kids, much more than me, are content in many different situations, and I'm very grateful for that.
Did you ever walk down the street and think differently than the one time?
Maybe I'll talk about that later.
Okay. So we moved now from here to there. We are learning to be content. We figured out we're learning the language. So now what does ministry look like? For us, it looks exactly the same as it did here. It's about relationships. And so that's what we want to focus on. We use Paul as our model. Think of what he said when he wrote to the church in Thessalonica. He said this. He said, "We loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." That he's got a holistic view of ministry. It's not just about a program or just about a message. It's about sharing your life with other people. And so really, that's something that we do here. It's something that we do there. It's something we can do around the world. It's a universal language, the language of relationships. And so what I'd like to do is share with you just a couple of people that we get to walk through life with. First of all is a guy named Jonathan Quintanilla. Now, I first met Jonathan because he was looking for a job. We were working in a village, a very poor village. Jonathan had grown up in a village probably poorer than the village where we were working, but he was looking for work. I ended up hiring him, and we saw this progression. First was I was his boss, and he was working for me. It moved on to an opportunity for me to be a mentor in his life. And then it moved on from that mentorship to actual friendship, to the point where when we went to go full-time on staff with the church, we gave that ministry to Jonathan and his wife. And some of you guys have been there. And what's happened is he's taken that ministry and he's grown it beyond what we could have ever done. And that's really what you want for your kids or anybody that you're building into. You want them to be better than you are. And so as Jonathan and I shared life together, that was one of the things that happened for him. Now, Maureen focuses on relationships as well. And if you know Maureen, you know that that's what she leads with. That is what she's about. She's First Thessalonians 2:8 all the time. And so there's two things that she does on a Wednesday, typical Wednesday for Maureen. One, she goes to a place called Abeja. Abeja is a flower company. And what Abeja, the reason it exists is not just to sell flowers. The reason it exists is to give women who are coming out of very difficult situations, have no real skill sets, give them an opportunity to have a job and to grow. And one of the other things they give to them is they give them life skills. One of those life skills is learning English, because our little town, even though it's right in the middle of Guatemala, it's a tourist town. And to know English will help you advance. And so Maureen goes on Wednesday afternoons to teach English. But here's the thing that's interesting about Maureen's English classes. The primary goal of her English classes is not that they would be proficient in the language. Probably should be, but it's not. The primary goal is to have opportunities to talk about Jesus. And that's what happens as Maureen meets with this group of ladies on a regular basis. They talk about real life things, and they talk about it in English, and they talk about it in Spanish. But it's about the relationship, much more than just the program or the class. In fact, I usually drive Maureen there, and there's some times where I'll sit in the office and do some work while she's teaching class. And it's funny because the one thing she has taught them more than anything else is how to laugh in English, because that's all I hear coming out of that group is laughter together. And there's a joy because Maureen's bringing Jesus to that. When she's done, you can stop me if I get anything wrong. And when she's done, we go back home, and she gets ready to meet with a group of young women who are all North Americans. Some of them are married to Guatemalans, but they all serve in really difficult places. They serve in feeding programs. They serve in orphanages. There's one particular woman who was there for a while who serves in a deaf community. And so each of these folks need somebody to walk alongside them. And Maureen is that person because it's a focus on relationships and helping them to go deeper in the places where they're serving, in the really difficult places where they're serving. They need somebody who's going to not only walk alongside them, but somebody who's also older who's going to build into them. And our daughter is one of the people in that group, which is really kind of cool when you think about the relationship that when it changes from your son or daughter to someone who then says, hey, could you meet with me and my friends? And that's what happens when you have relational ministry. But here's my encouragement to you, is you do not need to teach English. You do not need to be in a ministry in order to have relational ministry. I'll give you an example in my life. Every 2 weeks, I would go get my haircut. And my barber is this skilled. This is what he can do. He can do a lot of other things, but at least he can do this. And so his name is Romeo. And when I would first go and sit down with him, we would kind of talk about his life. He was interested in my life, started being a little bit more interested in spiritual things. I invited him to church. And then come to find out, Romeo is bilingual. And so I invited Romeo to begin to translate for my messages on Sunday mornings, which means that Romeo is not only getting my notes a few days beforehand for the message, he's then hearing the message as I preach it. He's translating it in his mind, and then he's speaking it. And he does that for 2 services.
Why are your messages translated?
Our messages are translated because we're a bilingual church. So when I preach, it's in English and it's translated into Spanish. When the senior pastor Giovanni speaks, he speaks in Spanish, and then it's translated into English. And then our worship is really a mix of the two. But for Romeo at this point, he is hearing the message more than anybody else in the church in the context of our relationship together. And then we start meeting together. And we just finished going through the book of Acts. 28 chapters, 28 weeks together on a regular basis, sharing breakfast and coffee together. And this is an amazing thing because I just get so thrilled when things like this happen. Romeo goes, Todd, I knew about Jesus, but I didn't know about anybody else in the Bible. And he goes, I didn't know about Paul. And he goes, you know what? Paul's B.A., except he didn't say just the letters. And it's just a wonderful thing for me to have somebody go, it's just from the outside. He's not a church guy. He's not using church language. He's just going, this is amazing to me. And it happens in the context of relationships. And so for you and I, for any of us, we can do that naturally, just in the course of having our relationships with our people, with our barbers or our baristas or whoever it is that we see on a regular basis.
Yeah, so because I'm thinking, some of you are thinking, this is a great story, but I don't live in Guatemala. I do live in Loudoun County where you left, so what am I supposed to do? And for one, just enjoy your grocery store for me. Enjoy Amazon delivery. Okay, but besides that, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, I forgot. See, I'm preaching to myself. We're all missionaries wherever we live. We really are. And I have to tell you that the news about Loudoun County makes it all the way down to to Guatemala. That's how famous y'all are. But as I watch the news and I listen to podcasts, I'm struck with the fact that there's a large amount of the USA that think Christians hate them. And my challenge to you is the same as it is to me in Guatemala, and that is to become friends with someone who isn't like you. Someone who doesn't look like you, believe like you, vote like you, act like you, or even speak your language. Including, I heard they need help with the high schoolers. Just thought I'd throw that in there for you. So if you're looking for a ministry. But it will change your worldview, being around those people. I was friends with a woman whose husband knocked her teeth out, and we paid for her to go get her new teeth put in, and that really changed my view on health care. I had different views moving there anyway. You just have to know I really fit in Loudoun County before I left here. And I fit in less every time I come back. But there was another woman. I had a collapsed lung, and I had to go to the hospital and have surgery in the city. And our gardener's wife had something. It's not our. We don't pay the gardener. Somebody else does. So he's not. And I don't know the woman, but she died, and I did not. And I came home and I cried and I said to Todd, the only reason I lived and she didn't was because we had money. And he said, well, no, also because God's in control and you're not. But and I said, but I feel like we should have paid for her to go to the hospital too. And he said, actually, Todd said, I only have money to save one wife, and I picked you. But still, I'm haunted by that and the lack of health care, even in that country. And then I see the same thing here. We're dear friends. In fact, they have our dog this month. We're dear friends with a mom who gave birth at 12. There's a whole story there. But her son is the hugest blessing. And we love him, and Todd does a lot of things with him. We do a lot of things with her. She's 21 now, and he just turned 9. And so it really changed my worldview on what women need to be single moms and the support they need, and the break that they need, and the fact that they need someone to come alongside them. I've also known of a home that had 2 girls that were literally in hiding for their life from a gang, and they were trying to get them asylum in the U.S. And the director of the home went to the embassy and said, this is a couple years ago, and said, what is the best way to get just these 2 girls? I've got 50 girls here. I only want to send 2, these 2, to literally save their life. What is the best way to get them to apply for asylum in the U.S.? And he said, take them to the Texas border. And the guy was like, absolutely not. It's a mess. I can't do that. It's challenged everything I've thought about immigration. They did end up actually going to another country instead of the U.S. because they couldn't get in. I have 101 more stories like this. So the thing is that once you're sitting with a mom whose teeth have been knocked out, all of a sudden it's not out there, or it's not a news story, or it's not and this is in a different country, I understand, but it's this person right here, and you want to help them. Anyway. My challenge to you is go to the same coffee shop every day and then ask that barista, what are you reading? And then read that book. I don't care if you're interested in it or not. And then talk to him about it and tell him you read it and it was great. And what did he think about it or she think about it? Do things on purpose. Volunteer to teach English. Do things that will get you out of your comfort zone. What if your family adopted a refugee family that's in the area? and just showed them around or took them to the doctor or helped translate or whatever. I heard a quote just this week, and it's had a huge impact on me. I honestly don't know who said it. I think the person that was accredited to it, I don't know that they said it. Don't love people so that you can share the gospel. Share the gospel because you love people. We share our story with you, but it's just one story, and it's really not super special, you know. But each one of us has a story that God's writing. And if you don't feel like your story is one that you would sit up here and tell about, then change that. Do something to make your story reflect God so that you can tell people about it. Because each of us have a story, and He made us for a story. He made us for that. So thank you for having us today. I know next is, you know what, I think it's called Table Talk, right? But I keep thinking Saturday Night Live Coffee Talk. And I was like, okay, that's really funny. And then I was like, but only in my mind, because that's not correct. All right, but I think on your table are the questions. They like people to be, or on the, in that paper? Okay. They like people to be in groups of like 6 to 8. So if you're at a table that's less than that, join with another table and take a few minutes and just talk about those questions. And but let me pray for us real quick before we do that, okay? Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for letting us have this opportunity to come and speak. Thank you for this church and the way I feel the Spirit, Lord. Thank you that these people love you and are impacting Loudoun County. Lord, I pray that you would help each one of us and them, be missional in our life and impact the people around us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.